Family finally found Book 4, Maddie's First Mother's Day Chapter 2 Showtime. Sunday, Mother's Day. The light coming in through the bedroom window was muted, the sky gray and overcast, rain threatened, the forecast calling for a 90% chance throughout the day. Maddie didn't care what the weather looked like. Today was her first Mother's Day, and even though she had downplayed it all week, she had a hard time falling asleep last night. She felt like a kid on Christmas Eve. The boys had been working on secret projects all week, real hush-hush stuff, and now it was morning. She woke with a smile.
Happy Mother's Day!
Tom sat quietly beside her. She turned toward him, and he gave her a warm smile.
I heard Sonic up a little while ago, so someone's eager to start the day.
She rolled over, curling into his waiting arms.
How about we just snuggle for a little bit? You were warm.
He pulled her close.
Well, if you insist.
The two lay curled in each other's arms for a few moments, enjoying the silence and warmth, until the unmistakable sound of their middle child's rapid tapping echoed off their bedroom door. Without pause, the door opened, and a little black nose poked into the room.
I heard voices,
Sonic said, and Tails' slaughter floated behind him.
Are you guys ready to get up, or are you gonna lay in bed all day like boring grown-ups?
Is laying in bed all day an option?
Tom asked, rearranging his pillow to sit up.
Because that sounds like a great day.
The door flew open then, and in the blink of an eye Sonic was in bed with them, while Tails flew overhead to land next to Maddie.
Not an option, then.
Tom said, giving an exaggerated frown as his wife sat up.
Oh well.
Happy Mother's Day.
Hedgehog and Fox called, snuggling up close to Maddie and hugging her from both sides. Tom took the opportunity to slide out of bed and get dressed.
Thank you, sweeties.
She said, hugging them back.
What wonderful boys I have, but where's?
He's, dealing with some stuff.
Sonic said, his voice soft.
But I think he's getting close to working through it.
Maddie glanced up and noticed a dark figure standing in the hall, just outside the open bedroom door. She smiled.
Oh well, he knows he can come talk to me whenever he's ready.
The figure gave a small nod before moving off.
Presents.
Tails said, clapping his hands.
We have presents.
You guys didn't have to get me anything.
We know.
Sonic said, practically vibrating with excitement.
But Dad made us.
But
Tom cried as he pulled his shirt over his head.
don't listen to that little troll. Anything they have is entirely their doing.
He smiled.
But speak of presents, it goes first.
Tom opened his nightstand drawer and pulled out a small jewelry box. He slid back onto the bed and held it toward his wife as he opened the lid.
Well, happy Mother's Day, Maddie.
Oh, Tom.
Maddie said, a hand pressing against her chest. Inside the box was a small pendant, about the size of a nickel on a silver chain. The pendant showed a woman in silhouette made out of silver, cradling 3 gemstones in her curled arms, one red, one blue, and one amber.
It's beautiful.
Nice one, Donut Lord.
Sonic said, giving his dad a thumbs up.
Very nice.
I have my moments.
Tom said, shrugging. He leaned over and gave his wife a kiss as she pulled the necklace out of the box.
Mother looks good, and you're great.
I have my moments.
She said, smiling. He took the necklace from her and fastened the clasp behind her. She touched the pendant, running a thumb over the 3 gems.
I love it, thank you.
Tom leaned in for a quality kiss as the boys rolled their eyes and made the age-appropriate ew sounds.
Yes, yes.
Sonic said, waving a dismissive hand.
Jewelry's nice and all, but I've got something you're gonna love even more.
Oh, really? Oh,
Tom said, casting a sideways glance at the hedgehog.
Those hands look awfully empty to me.
Sonic held up a finger before zipping out of the room. A second later he was back, a large rectangular box in his outstretched arms.
Gift number 1.
He said, opening the lid of the box to show the confectionery delights inside.
1 dozen cinnamon rolls from your favorite bakery in Green Hills, Guilty Pleasures Desserts.
Maddie's eyes went wide.
Are you kidding? Oh my gosh, I love those. I haven't had any in forever. They always run out before we get there.
The hedgehog smiled.
I placed an order specifically for you first thing on Monday. I ran out this morning to pick them up.
You're my favorite kid right now.
Ain't no fair.
Tails cold, she tipped her head in a wink.
Don't worry, Fluffers, it changes practically minute by minute.
She reached out to give the little fox a boop on his nose. He giggled, his annoyance forgotten.
Gift number 2.
Sonic said, zipping out of the room for another second. He returned with a large bonnet wrapped in a bright blue bow.
Can have Mother's Day without flowers.
She took them and sniffed.
You're 2 for 2, kiddo.
But I saved the best for last.
He reached back into his quills and pulled out an envelope. His demeanor changed, becoming more serious.
I wrote you a letter.
A letter?
She reached out to take it from him, moving to sit at the end of the bed.
Yeah, well, it's about how I feel about you.
He seemed to shrink slightly, becoming smaller.
Can I read it now?
His muzzle flashed red.
Sure, I guess.
He glanced at Tom.
Don't read it out loud. Please.
Take this.
Tom said, catching the unspoken hint.
But don't be gassy outside before he makes a mess downstairs. We'll be back in a few minutes, and you can give Mommy a...
The little fox nodded, casting a glance at Sonic.
Okay, sounds...
Tom grabbed the cinnamon roll box on his way out.
I'll just take this to the kitchen.
He turned before closing the door.
Take your time. I'll be back when you're ready.
Once the door had closed, Maddie looked at Sonic.
You're sure you want me to read it now?
The hedgehog thought for a second, biting his lip. Then he nodded.
Okay.
She tore the envelope open and pulled out the 2 pages of notebook paper inside. She arched an eyebrow slightly. Normally Sonic's handwriting could be quite accurately described as chicken scratch, but the printing on the pages was clear and neat. He must have taken his time with this.
Dear Mom, I knew before I met you. I have been coming here, watching you and Dad for a long time. I watched as you renovated the house, watched as you planted flowers and trees, watched as you cared for the wildlife, from the deer and bunnies and squirrels to the raccoons that dug into your trash at night. Watched as you twisted yourself into weird positions on the deck on Saturday mornings. I tried to do them too, hidden in the trees, but I don't think hedgehog limbs are meant to bend like that. I came here because I like to pretend we were a family. I was so alone, and pretending made it feel like I wasn't. You were kind. Even from a distance, I could tell. You would smile at strangers and took care of animals and always looked for the good in everything, and your smile was so bright, it always made me feel happy, even though it was never for me. And now I'm here, and we are a real family. And I know the real you. I know how kind you are, how loving you are, how wonderful your hugs feel when you wrap your arms around me and squeeze, how amazing your kisses feel on that spot right in the middle of my forehead, how gentle your hands feel when they hold me and comfort me after a nightmare or when I've hurt myself usually doing something you warned me not to. And I know your smile, your bright, wonderful smile that is for me now. No matter how often I see it directed at me, it always makes me happy, because I can make you do that. I can make you smile with a joke or a silly face or something as simple as a quick hug. It sounds a little selfish, making you happy so I can be happy, but if we're both getting something good out of it, it can't be all bad. I know how patient and understanding you are. I know I can be a pain sometimes. I know I can cause trouble. I mean, you met me when I was in trouble, but you stood by me. You helped me. You took care of me. You welcomed me into your home, into your life so quickly. You loved me. It took me a while to fully understand it. A kind of embarrassingly long time. Honestly, how could someone as wonderful as you ever love a weird alien hedgehog who had turned your life on its head? Completely and utterly wrecked the perfect little organized and predictable life you had before that. I had watched you for years. You loved your life. You were happy. But somehow, for whatever reason, you loved me. You really, really loved me. It was scary and wonderful, and it makes me want to cry, knowing what I've been missing all these years. But I try to focus on the now. I'm here now, and I try to cherish each and every hug, kiss, smile, and touch from you. I wanted to remember them and how they made me feel, always. I love you, Mom. I've known you, really known you for long in the grand scheme of things, but I think you've always been my mom. So much. I love you so much. Happy Mother's Day. Love, Sonic.
Maddie read the letter twice, hand covering her mouth, tears in her eyes. She looked up into the shiny eyes of her first and now middle child. She carefully laid the letter beside her on the bed and reached her arms toward her boy.
Oh, sweetie.
She whispered, and Sonic moved into her embrace with a smile.
That was beautiful.
I couldn't get out everything I wanted to say.
He said, nuzzling his head into her shoulder.
It was all mixed up in my head. There was so much. I couldn't get it to come out.
It was wonderful.
She said, running a hand down his quills.
Oh, my sweet boy, it was perfect.
She pulled back long enough to plant a kiss on his forehead.
Just like you.
He laughed into her shoulder, holding her tightly. Into her
But that changes minute by minute. Right.
She laughed.
Right.
They laughed together, giving each other a tight squeeze before separating. Sonic sniffed and swiped an arm under his nose.
I love you.
He said, his voice soft.
I'm so happy you're my mom.
She smiled, whipping at the tears on his cheeks with her thumb.
I love you too, sweetie. I'm happy you are my boy.
A soft knock on the bedroom door broke the moment, and Tom popped his head inside.
How's it going?
Sonic wiped his eyes quickly before turning toward the door.
Yeah, she loved it. Course she did. Why wouldn't she?
The door opened fully, and Tails walked in, hands tucked behind his back.
Sorry, Tails. That's gonna be a hard act to follow.
The little fox offered his brother a sly smile.
We'll see about that.
He turned to Maddie.
Can I give him in prison now?
He turned to Maddie.
Of course, sweetie. Lay it on me.
Tails snickered and pulled his hands out, producing a small, flat, round disc.
Beheld the Miles Prowler Interactive Holographic Mother's Day Special.
When only silence responded, he continued.
Here, just flip the switch on the side.
He handed it to Maddie, who did as instructed. A light blinked on, and he took it back to place on the floor. The light flickered for a second, and then another Tails blinked into existence.
Surprise!
The original Tails said, flourishing his hands like an illusionist at a magic show.
It's an upgraded, more portable version of the holograms from my Miles Electric ad.
Holy cow, that's so cool.
Tom said, moving closer to inspect the artificial Tails.
It looks just like him.
He reached out and his hand passed over the simulation's head. He jerked his hand back. Then
It feels just like you do.
It's got a localized force field to approximate a physical form.
Tails turned to Maddie.
Talk to it.
She gave him a questioning look.
But it's a hologram.
He nodded.
Ask it a question.
Maddie, feeling a little silly.
Are you hungry, Tails?
The hologram turned to look directly at her.
No thanks, Mom, I ain't fine.
She jerked back slightly, looking back at the real fox. Rex.
Holy crap, how did you do that?
He grinned.
It's got facial recognition software, and I programmed it with my personality. This is essentially a virtual Tails. It can recognize people, hold conversations, and respond in a way I would.
Dude's kinda creepy.
Sonic said, his brow furrowed, then he smiled.
But really cool.
Tails, this is incredible.
Maddie said, smiling.
You never cease to amaze me.
Yee.
The kid said, rubbing the back of his neck with a hand.
I could have programmed it with a message for you.
He glanced toward Sonic, who nodded with a smile.
Say no more. Little bro, I get you.
He said, grabbing the flowers from the bed.
I'll just put these in some water downstairs.
He took hold of Tom's arm.
Come on, Dad. They need a minute.
Man, I'm missing all the good stuff.
Tom whined as the door closed behind them. Once alone, Maddie turned to her youngest son.
You really are a brilliant little boy, you know that.
His muzzle flushed.
Electric stuff just makes a lot of sense to me.
He turned to his hologram.
Tails, play Mother's Day message.
The virtual fox nodded and looked back toward Maddie. The image blanked for a split second as the message began.
Hi, Mom.
The holographic fox giggled slightly before clearing its throat.
It still feels kind of weird saying that. I've never had a mom before. I don't really know what happened to mine. I've always been alone, I thought. I mean, it was just how I was supposed to be. And because I never had a mom, I didn't really miss it. Cantus, what you never had, right? I focused a lot on my inventions. They made sense. They did what I wanted them to do. Well, most of the time I kept myself busy and tried to focus on the positive.
Maddie glanced at the real Tails, who had wrapped his twin tails around himself. His muzzle still burned red.
But
The virtual fox said, drawing her attention back. The hologram wrapped itself up in its tails, just like its creator stood now.
there are times I felt so alone. The village didn't understand me. They thought I was weird, afraid. And they've all had families, mothers who took care of them. None of them, no matter what, I didn't have that. And even though I told myself this was just the way things were for me, that I was fine on. But I wasn't. I realized that now. I was lonely. Now get or machine or invention could change that. So I reached out looking for anything that could help me feel like I wasn't so alone. Like I wasn't such a freak. And that's when I found Sonic. I thought I had found someone different like me, but way cooler. And I didn't feel alone anymore.
The hologram looked up into Maddie's eyes, a blush working across its face. Tears trickled down the muzzle of both fox kits.
And then after all the Robotech crazes, you've been your homie, a little fuck who barely knew it all. You're kindly from the first moment we met, and you never made an issue with my tales, or my inventions, or my mechanical abilities. It was like you didn't see any of that, just saw me. You were kind and gentle and loving toward me, even though I was just some weird fox on a griddle. You cared me and treated me like family, even when we were strangers. No one had ever been so nice to me before. It's strange to be in a home like this in the beginning. It felt like you only kept me because I'm Sonic's friend. But now I feel like this is where I belong. With all of you, my real family. We've never had a mom before. I don't know why mine didn't want me. But if being alone for a while meant I would eventually find you, I'd have you be my mom instead. I'm glad she didn't. Because you're the best mom I could ever hope for.
The virtual fox flicked its tails back behind itself and gave her a wide smile.
Happy Mother's Day, Mom. I love you.
The message paused for a second before flickering and shutting down. Maddie looked up at the real fox, standing wrapped in his tails, looking at her with big blue eyes over the fluff. She smiled and reached her arms out.
Come here, Fluffers,
She said, and he slowly moved toward her. I'll get you. She said, and he slowly moved toward her.
Oh, my little baby fox.
His tails withdrew, and he reached for her, his eyes shiny.
Mom.
He whispered, tears spilling down his cheeks. She scooped him into her arms, positioning him in her lap for a high, quality hug.
Oh, my sweet little Floof, I am so happy you were here with us. My brilliant, sweet, darling boy.
My mom.
He said, hugging her tightly.
My real mom. I love you.
I love you too, you little fluff monster.
She kissed the top of his head and pulled back slightly.
Your hologram was amazing.
He giggled again, muzzle turning pink.
I made it so you could have some help if you needed it. It can do some cleaning or just keep you company if you want.
Brilliant.
She said, kissing his head again.
I love that big, wonderful brain of yours. You were so clever.
Oh.
He said, wriggling in her lap.
Mom.
Sounds like things are wrapping up.
Tom said, poking his head in the room.
I take it Tails' gift was a hit.
Very much so.
Maddie said, giving her Yoon just another squeeze before he jumped down.
It was very sweet.
Not as sweet as those cinnamon rolls downstairs.
Sonic said, following Tom inside. He hooked a thumb toward the door.
Ready to dig in.
Maddie opened her mouth to answer when another figure entered the room and cleared his throat. Knuckles stood near the doorway, his hands tucked behind his back.
May I speak with you, dear Maddie? May I speak with you, dear Maddie?
He asked, his voice soft.
Unless you'd like to have your rose first.
No, Knuckles, we can speak now.
She said, giving her husband a little head nod. He nodded back and started shooing the other two boys out of the room.
Come on, guys. Let's give them some privacy.
Don't touch my cinnamon rolls.
She warned as the door closed.
No promises, Mom.
Sonic called, and Tails laughed as they moved to the stair. Maddie gathered the letter and holographic device to put in her nightstand drawer. Knuckles stood where he was by the door.
Just you and me now.
She said, crawling back onto the bed. She sat cross-legged and patted the spot in front of her.
What's on your mind?
The Echidna stood where he was for a few seconds. Before moving toward the bed, he kicked off his boots and climbed up to sit in front of her, crossing his legs like hers. He started, curling and uncurling his hands into fists, a nervous habit.
I have no gift for you. I mean no disrespect.
She smiled.
It's fine. Sweetie, what's been bothering you this week? I feel like I've barely seen you.
He dropped his head, watching his fists tense and relax.
This Mother's Day has created odd feelings within me.
What sort of feelings?
He hesitated before answering, swallowing hard.
I remember my mother, how she cared for me, how I loved her.
I know you miss her. Honorable, it's okay to feel sad she's gone.
He shook his head.
That's not.
He furrowed his brow.
I do miss her very much, but that is not the odd feeling I'm talking about.
Oh.
I feel as though I'm being pulled in two directions at once.
How so?
Knuckles lifted his head, his violet eyes locking with her brown.
I care for you. I feel we are becoming close, very close, as I was with her, but I also feel...
His muzzle wrinkled as he searched for the right word.
Shame.
Because of your feelings.
He shook his head.
Sheriffdom said mothers are often taken for granted because of all they do. Right here I have been guilty of this with my mother. I feel shame because I never told her how I felt, how grateful I was for what she did.
He paused, dropping his eyes.
How much I loved her.
Maddie cupped his face with a gentle hand, and lifted so he looked at her.
Honey, she knew. I'm sure of it.
But I never told her.
He said, leaning into her hand.
And now she's gone.
Honey, you've told me about your mother and how much she loathed you. I can pretty safely guarantee that she knew you loathed and appreciated her. You told her, just not in words.
He sat silent for a moment, and she stroked his cheek and muzzle with her thumb. He closed his eyes, a small smile on his lips.
Sonic said I can keep my mother's memories, but also make new ones with you.
He said, his voice soft. Maddie nodded.
He's right. I don't want to replace your mother. Sweetie, she'll always have a special place in your heart, as she should. I just want to make sure you feel loved and cared for, like you need. And only you get to decide how close we become. It's completely your decision. Whatever you are comfortable with.
She leaned close, resting her forehead against his.
But you'll always be my special big guy.
His fist opened one last time. His hands relaxed in his lap. She pulled back and offered him a kind smile.
Are you feeling better?
He itched of thought for a moment before nodding.
I have made a decision.
And what's that?
I never told my mother how I felt before I lost her.
He said, straightening his back to sit taller.
That is not a mistake I will make again.
Before Maddie even knew what was happening, Knuckles scooted closer and threw his arms around her neck. He pulled her close, resting his head in the hollow of her
I do love you.
He said, his voice a harsh whisper.
These past months have shown me how much I had missed when I lost my tribe, my family. You are always kind and compassionate, and I am honored to be welcomed into your family.
Maddie's heart blossomed with more love than she thought possible for this boy, this normally stoic, strong, confident boy, who now hugged her with trembling arms. Her shoulder became wet, and she realized he was crying. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him close and squeezing tight.
Knuckles, you are a wonderful addition to our family.
She said, tears rolling down her own cheeks.
Strong, honest, and such a big heart. I enjoy our chats. You hold a wisdom beyond your years. I am honored to be your mother.
One more tight squeeze and they pulled apart. Maddie placed a kiss on his forehead, and he smiled.
I also enjoy our talks,
He said, whipping his wet face with the heels of his hands.
and I apologize I was not much company this week.
She gave a dismissive wave.
You are dealing with a lot of big emotions. I just wish you didn't feel like you had to deal with them all by yourself.
I spoke with my brothers the other night. They helped.
Good. I'm glad you're opening up some. Your family loves you and we only want to help.
He nodded, a small smile on his face.
Accepting help is hard for me. I've never had people I could trust so completely before. I will try.
She smiled, placing another kiss on his forehead.
Good. That's a Mother's Day gift I can get behind.
Happy Mother's Day, dear Maddie.
He wrinkled his muzzle.
Mother, Harry.
Maddie ran a hand down his quills.
Whatever you are comfortable with, honey.
He smiled.
Mother.
I love you, Knuckles.
She said, giving his hands a squeeze.
My strong son.
They shared another forehead touch when a light knock sounded on the door.
Everything can hear.
Tom said, sneaking inside.
Sonic's organ singing we need to go over cinnamon rolls if you don't come down soon.
Maddie sighed, rolling her eyes.
Heaven forbid we have something sugary in this house without his grubby little fingers all over it.
Do not, Mother.
Knuckles said, sliding off the bed and heading toward the door.
I shall protect your rolls of cinnamon from his fingers. There shall be no unauthorized snacking this day.
The echidna ran downstairs, yelling something that sounded a lot like,
Unhand those rolls, you conniving hedgehog.
Tom turned to his wife.
Did he just call you?
She nodded, smiling wide.
Yes.
She laughed, throwing her arms around his neck.
Oh my goodness, what a wonderful Mother's Day.
Sounds like it this morning.
He said, hugging her back.
But we better get downstairs before that happens.
Maddie sighed again, a smile on her lips. Caring for the Super Wachowski brothers was anything but boring. Later that evening, the family gathered in the living room for movie night. All 5 Wachowskis piled onto the couch together, Tom and Maddie in the middle, Tails lying across their laps, Sonic leaning against Tom, and Knuckles against Maddie. As the boys grew, they could probably need a bigger couch, but for now, Maddie liked this layout just fine.
That was terrible.
Tom said, clicking the TV off.
Just awful.
It wasn't that bad.
Maddie said, running her fingers through Tails' little hair tuft on his forehead. The kid smiled, closing his eyes.
Sure, it was a little slow, and the writing wasn't great.
The acting stunk too.
Sonic said, stretching.
I mean, really stunk.
I have endured many hardships in my life.
Knuckles added, shaking his head.
But that was a form of torture I have never seen.
All right.
Maddie said, a slight laugh in her voice.
It was bad, I admit it, but we're gonna have stinkers every now and then.
There's stinkers and then there's that.
Sonic said, gesturing to the TV.
I don't think there's a word for what that was.
Hey, this horrible experience aside.
Tom said, turning to his wife.
Did you have a nice Mother's Day?
Maddie smiled. The boys all turned to look at her, and she looked at each one in turn. They smiled as she met their gaze.
Had the best Mother's Day ever.
Okay, real talk now.
Sonic said, giving her a cocked eyebrow.
Which present was your favorite and why was it mine?
She said one was incredible, amazing, and brilliant.
Tails said, sitting up and counting off on his fingers.
Beat that.
Yeah, well, she said mine was beautiful and perfect.
Sonic said, crossing his arms.
Mother said I hold a wisdom beyond my years.
Knuckles said, puffing out his chest and drawing their attention.
So you would do well to listen to me more often.
She did not say that. Wait a minute.
Sonic said, leaning forward.
What did you say?
I am wise, and this is why you should listen to me.
Oh,
the hedgehog said, waving a hand.
before that, what did you call her?
Knuckles.
Mother.
Sonic sat still for a second, before a smile spread across his face. Then it dropped, and he bumped Tails' knee with the back of his hand.
Knuckles wins.
What made you say that?
The kid asked, turning to look at his eldest brother.
Because he called her mother for the first time today.
Sonic said, hopping down from the couch.
That beats any other gifts.
No fair.
Can I get a word in edgewise here?
Maddie said, holding her hands up.
I had a wonderful Mother's Day and loved every gift.
She looked pointedly at Sonic.
Every one. They were personal to each of you and all very special. It's not a competition.
Tom nodded.
That's right, Mother's Day isn't a competition and you're viewed differently based on your gifts.
His lips curled in a cheeky smile.
Father's Day over is about a month away. I will be ranking your favor harshly, so keep that in mind as you work on your offerings. Breads are also acceptable and encouraged.
Maddie slapped his chest.
You do remember who you were talking to, right? Is this something you really want to encourage?
Her husband's eyes widened.
Oh crap, you're right.
He turned to the boys.
Forgot said any of that.
Too late, Dad. The challenge has been accepted.
Sonic said, a gleam in his eye.
Nice job, Donut Dork. I'll try not to laugh too hard when this blows up in your face.
Maddie said, her eyes narrowed. Then she turned to Boaz.
How about one last hug for Mother's Day before bed?
Sonic climbed over Tom to latch onto her from the side. Tails twisted his body around to hug from the front, and Knuckles reached around her to complete the circle. She wrapped her arms around her boys and squeezed tightly. These boys may not have come from her body, or even from her planet, but they were her world now. They were hers now, and she was theirs. Best Mother's Day ever.